I always had this deal with myself that, if something really bad happened, all bets are off. I'm going to go back to drinking wine, even if it's just a glass or two for medicinal reasons. And here, the worst thing had happened. This very tight knit family lost, its matriarch in what we think might be not such a good way. So, to make a long story short, um, it turned out that the person who took my mom's life was my son's biological mother.
Okay, we are back with Tanya J for part 2 of her story. Please don't start your listening experience right here because it will be pretty jarring. Go back and listen to part 1 and hear so interesting, relatable, all the things. But okay, so catch us up. So your mom and your sister come home from China.
Right.
They don't move
Eh,
in with you. They
No.
She already had her condo. You fixed it up. Fix
Mom
and
moves
busted
back into her
pipes into
condo.
her condo. Your sister moves back to her house, or
She
did she
fi
move in
she
with your
finds
mom?
an apartment, or I had helped her find an apartment, and she and the
Wow.
girls move in there.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, boom, I get family back. But I get family back as sober Tanya, and no place to escape Tanya. But it was really fun because my mom didn't really drink. My sister would have a glass of wine from time to time. So it was really joyful for a while. And I remember Thanksgiving 2018, my in-laws are, well, I'll just say very Baptist Christians and very right wing. And my mom is like, and my sister considers herself a Buddhist. And, my mom was just about love and peace, and both very left side. I straddle a fence, and lean left, want I not fiscals conservative fiscally, but otherwise,
Hard to do
th-
that these days.
that these days is impossible.
Kinda
So
have to just lean left.
I'm just going all in left. So
Yeah, same.
I
Don't
just
worry. You're
and I
among
do.
friends.
No, oh, no, 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 I can't. I I just got stopped on an around the world trip because I couldn't go because he decided to bomb Iran. So, I literally had to turn around and fly from Australia back home because I couldn't go forward with my trip to Dubai. So, anyway, that's off topic. Um, uh,
So things are going well, though,
yes.
but it's a
And
bit stressful.
it's a
Your
little
husband's a little
stressful.
quiet. Your husband's not quite as fun, so are you leaning a little bit to mom and sister?
Yeah, I am. And my best friend and I love to throw parties. I was a big party thrower, and I learned to throw sober parties. So I'd have sober cues, and so all the people from rehab that stayed sober, I would have them all over, a booze-free, or, what was it? Booze-free Halloween parties. I don't know, I just came up with funny names for it all and stuff. And so I was in a very celebratory mood. Like, I felt like I had come back to life, and everything looked better, and I felt better, and I'd started losing weight again, and it just, my hair stopped falling out. Like all these things that happen when you stop eating and only drink. Um, so on that Thanksgiving, and I'll never forget it because I decided it was the first time all of us were going to be together in like 10 years. And so I made little cards, and each person had a word. There were place cards for where I wanted people to sit, but on the inside there was a word, and I picked each word specifically for each person, and I just said, "Okay, just so you guys know, there are little place cards and with words inside, and you may want to pick it up and take a look at it. And if you feel like sharing on that word, if it relates to you, great. If it doesn't." And it turned into just this beautiful Thanksgiving, like the best we've ever had kind of Thanksgiving, because people got really honest. And, it was, I, I picked words to their everyone's strengths and, and it allowed for peace to be at the table. And my mom came up to me and she said, "Honey, that was the most beautiful Thanksgiving I've ever had. You've really grown a lot. I see this beautiful side of you coming out and rejoining the world kind of thing." And it was so lovely after the devastating words she had said to me a few years beforehand. And then here comes the dark part of the story. That was Thanksgiving. And on December 16th of that same year, my mom decided she'd been wanting to get a puppy. And she already had a puppy that I ended up taking care of while she was in China. And unfortunately, he passed away. So she was going to get a puppy. So my sister and nieces all went with her to go get this puppy, brought it back to the condo. It was a Saturday and they were or it was a Sunday, excuse me, it was a Sunday, and they were playing with the puppy, and I was busy cooking baking cookies, which is what I did, and I think my mom was a little bummed out that I didn't come over to meet her new puppy because, like, when she had something new, she wanted me, to come, but I hadn't showered, and I was baking, and, like I said, "I'm gonna bring Eamon tomorrow after school," and she's like, "Okay, great." So just gonna bring my son, pick him up from school. We'll go over to Alma's house and see her new puppy. So typical Monday morning, busy at work, dropped son off at school, but the first call I made was to my mom. How did your first night go? Because a lot of times puppies don't have great first nights. They yip, and I just wanted so desperately to hear how it went. She didn't pick up, which I thought was strange because it meant she would have had to take her hearing aid out because they were Bluetooth. She was so proud of her Bluetooth hearing aids that she could answer phones and listen to music at the same time. Um, and so I was in meetings, typical Monday morning meetings, and then I started calling again and texting, and I was getting a little more concerned because it was getting later in the day and later in the late morning. And by now I would have absolutely heard from her. So I called my sister. I'm like, "Have you gotten a hold of mom?" And she's like, "No." I'm like, "Well, I'm starting to get a little worried." Now, I was working in Sherman Oaks at the time, and she was living in Pasadena at the time, which is also where my mom was living. And I'm like, "Lo, would you go over and knock on her door and just see if maybe she slipped and fell, or, just to see if everything's okay, and I'll get in the car now and come." But it was gonna be an hour drive to get there. And on the drive over, I had power of attorney because of when she was in China. And I said, "I think it's" Lori was banging, screaming at the door, and nobody was answering, and her car was in the parking lot, and so we knew something was wrong. And, um, I said, "Lo, call the police, call 911." And, he came over, and, I was on the phone on speaker. I said, "Lo, I'm here for you. Like, whatever we're gonna hear it together." And he had to break open the door, and I was like, "I have power of attorney, don't worry, break it open," and there was my mom lying dead on the floor. And my sister my sisters said, "I heard the policeman say she's gone." And Lori knew I was still driving, and so she didn't want me to know, and I'm like, "Lo, I heard what he said, and I'm 10 minutes away." And the and I kid you not, the very first thing that went through my head was, "At least I made my amends, and at least I was able," even though she didn't like my amends, I made my amends. And I thought, "Wow, what a funny thing. I must be really in recovery if that's the first thing I think about," is that we were good, at least in my book. And so I'm trying to go through, I'm like, did she have an aneurysm? Did she, like, what possibly could have happened? Well, the police officer wouldn't let us go near her, and because he could tell that something was amiss. And so I arrive, they take us, we go into, like, the condo's recreation room, and we sit there, and all of a sudden there are literally like 25 police, ambulance, detectives. And so that's the first. So I said, "Is this normal for someone who maybe had a heart attack or a stroke or an aneurysm?" They're like, "Well, she," and this is true, I looked this up. uh, she wasn't under the care of a physician for a specific disease, so we have to treat it as suspicious, and so, that's why we have to so she we have to treat it as suspicious, and I'm like, "Okay, that made sense to me, but why so many people?" Well, when the when the first police officer came, he knew that it was foul play, and, my sister and I stayed up that night, and we kept hearing words about a taser and, they were asking us questions like, "Does she own a gun?" I'm like, "No, she's a grandma." "Does she own mace?" And I'm like, "No, she doesn't own mace." "Does she have a boyfriend?" I'm like, "I wish she'd had a boyfriend." I'm like, and we're just answering naturally. And then all of a sudden, and this is where there's a phrase of being saying something's God or odd, and this definitely is God for me. All of a sudden it came into my head that she had told me, so I need to back up a little bit. On the Friday night beforehand, we were taking Amen, my son, to therapy. And we had had him in therapy since he was 7, just because, and it was with and he's still with her. And it's a woman who herself was adopted. So it really has helped him, go through all the siblings that arrived and the whole concept of adoption. And my mom calls me and she's like, "Honey, I just got off the phone with the rudest DCFS worker." I'm like, "Really? Why?" And she's like, "Well, she needs some paper signed from Eamon's adoption." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "But this makes sense because I was still very close and am still very close with his biological family." He said, "Well, child number 4 is about to lose parental rights, and, they did just switch social workers, so that does smell true to me." And she was like, "Oh, I don't know how she got my phone number." And Brad pipes in, "Oh, you know, mom, I gave them to her because we would oftentimes get phone calls when another sibling would arrive." And so everything seemed legit to both of us. And I remember her saying, "Well, she's coming here at 11 on Monday." And for whatever reason, that stuck in my head. So everything's going on. And I finally said to one of the detectives, I said, they're like, "Did she have any appointments?" And then finally I said, "She did. She was supposed to be meeting um, a DCFS social worker to have a piece of paper signed." And he was like, "Well, why?" And I'm like, "Oh, well, our children are adopted but, my son's birth mom has had some problems with the law, and, you could probably look her up and see, but anyway, she just all I thought was that he'd kind of see the story of all the kids that had come and know who to talk to at DCFS. And, still at this point, we don't know it's murder. We just start suspecting because of the questions they were asking. And once that piece, that 11 o'clock social worker visit came out, everything changed. Like, it just I think there were something like 10 to a dozen fire engines and police cars, and they pretty much shut down the street, and helicopters started going around, and I'm still going, "But there's a puppy." And I'm like, "My mom just got a puppy. I have to go get the puppy." So, 1 o'clock in the morning now. This is started at like 1, and now it's 1 o'clock in the morning, and we're still there. And the hard part is that I called my husband to go pick up our son, and unfortunately, it was my husband that told him that Alma had passed away, but at that time, we just knew she had passed away. And, it's funny because my best girlfriend came, and, when we finally were able to get the puppy and bring the puppy back to my house, and I brought my sister and nieces and everybody up to my house, she followed me on the way home, and she said every time we'd pass a liquor store, she wanted to make sure I wasn't pulling in. And it didn't even cross my mind. Like, that was the furthest thing from my mind was to go to a liquor store, but, here she had just lived through me, not that long ago, getting sober, and, um, And she still to this day couldn't believe that I didn't stop, and I have to say that in my sharing and meetings and such, I always had this deal with myself that, if something really bad happened, all bets are off. I'm gonna go back to drinking wine, even if it's just a glass or 2 for medicinal reasons. And here, the worst thing had happened. This very tight-knit family lost, its matriarch in what we think might be not such a good way. So, to make a long story short, um, it turned out that, the person who took my mom's life was my son's biological mother, and, which presented a whole new set of concerns. One, because she wasn't caught yet, and, I learned later through the court process that I was next on the list, as was the social worker that gave, Amen to my son to my mom, and, I it becomes very surreal from that point on because, um, she is eventually caught, and then all of a sudden, we go into I start going down a very long tunnel, um, starting with finding out that it was murder, because forget just grieving the loss of my mom. This was like something out of a CSI, and, like, what to do with my son. So for 2 months, I would give him his bath, and he's like, "Mom, when do we get to hear about Alma and how she died?" And he got so frustrated because he's like, "Look, we're gonna get Aunt Lily and the girls together, and we're all gonna sit in a circle, and we're all gonna say how we think she died, and whoever has the most votes, that's gonna be it." And as a mom, as a sober, present mom, I had to finally make the decision that, both girls had cell phones and there was a lot of publicity around it, and I needed to make sure that he didn't find out from someone else other than us. So, we did a family session and with Eamon's therapist, and we agreed that she should be the one to tell all the kids so that no kid has the memory of the story being told. But that was the day that if I ever was gonna relapse, that would have been my relapse day because my son's childhood ended. Uh, the look on his face when she said, "I'm sorry, honey, it was your biological mom." He was like, "No, no." And just like, there's not enough love in the world to give a child who's hurting that badly. And for the next several years, I had to do whatever I could to help him through his grief. Um, and he thought it was his fault. He thought if he had been there, maybe she just would have kidnapped him and left Alma alone. And all this time, I'm doing this sober. And I'm doing it because if I had been drinking, man, could I have fucked up this kid. Like, said something really bad, like, "Well, your mom took my mom away," and, just think about the things you said when you were drunk, like, it just would've been so bad, and so, you're never supposed to get sober for somebody, but staying sober to not make matters worse, there was no question in my mind, although I needed an escape so badly, because what was supposed to be a relatively quick murder trial took 5 years.
Wow.
And I was the main witness, because I knew the relationship between my mom and the birth parent, and I was with her on visits because my mom was, fostering the other sister that was around, and, um, so my alcoholic thinking turned into crazy research. Like, I think I read 76 books in 6 months about the judicial system and people who kill and why do they murder and, all these things on child psychology books, like how to deal with it. Then even with my own grief and trauma, and realizing that I was suffering from severe PTSD, and I could sometimes only just go to meetings and cry, and because I couldn't cry at home. because every time my son saw me cry, he would think it was his fault. He'd keep asking about my husband. Being nurturing is not really in his vocabulary. He didn't know what to do with me, you know, because I needed to be held and he didn't know how to hold me. And so my fellows in my program held me up, and my sponsor and my best friend, who I used to call her driving Miss Crazy because she drove me to every single court appointment for 5 years, and she was with me from the start to the very end, and, um, the birth mom was found guilty of first-degree murder, and it was unanimous, and she's now serving her time, but she's pretty young, so there will be more challenges in the future as parole becomes an option. Raising a traumatized adopted child has, again, I want and still do so desperately to provide a stable, loving home where he can say anything he wants and feel anything he wants and know that he's going to be heard, and that it's only been recently that he can even just be left alone for a while. And I will say that aside from that one night, um, the night before we were going to tell him, which is the night that I would have gotten hammered if I could, but um, I knew it wouldn't make anything better. I played through the drink, as you would say, and it didn't look good on the other side. And I've had moments where, I mean, during those 5 years, I gained a ton of weight because I couldn't eat, and I mean, I couldn't move, and so the only thing that tasted good to me was peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. My face broke out into these blistery welts. I called them Chets, and I still do because I still get them. But, from Weird Science, Chet was that big blob at the end, so
Yeah.
that's what I thought my face looked like, was Chet, so I was like, "Oh, I got another Chet." Um, and I just remember my sponsor telling me, "You're just still in the middle of this very, very long tunnel." And I'd love to be able to tell you that once the tunnel was over, like, I was like, "Yippee, I'm free." It's like, no, then you go into an entire year of what did I just live through? And, I just recently was on a flight, and it was it was I I was very scared because I got stuck in Sydney, and um, couldn't go on to the Middle East, which is where I was going to do business because the war started, and, like, in that moment, like, airplanes and lounges were definitely places where I got my drink on, and I had to sit for 9 hours waiting for a plane to get fixed, and I had to put in an emergency call to my sponsor because I'm like, "I am surrounded by Sauvignon Blanc, and I am scared, and I just lived through, being stuck in a country not able to get home, and now I have to go home and fly home and be normal," and, so I'm not saying that I don't get urges from time to time, and I don't tell my story so that you can go, "Wow, look at you. You're so amazing. You can get through your mom's murder by your son's bio mom and not drink." No, it's like getting stuck in an airport makes me wanna drink. Going out to a club and seeing one of my favorite bands makes me wanna drink, but I think having this experience again, I could not have gotten through this sober, and my testimony would have been horrible had I been drinking, because they would have not taken my word as being accurate because I was slurring my words or something, and this really needed to be, like, the truth really needed to come out as far as what it was. So I escaped to little tiny cabins in the woods where I would cry, just by myself, and I would do artwork and painting and bring up soda water and cafe lattes and just have time for me. I see an amazing therapist who I still see, who has a PhD in neuropsychology, so I understood what was happening in my brain when it was happening.
Has your sister been a good support?
Has who?
Your sister?
Um, we love each other dearly, and, um we are good supports for each other, but we're grieving a different person.
Mhm.
She's grieving the person she knows, and I'm grieving the person that I knew, and that doesn't necessarily make for the same person. And unfortunately, my youngest niece, who struggles a little bit with her mental health, had 14 suicide attempts because she
Oh,
just
wow.
wanted to go live with grandma. So that was all going on during this time. She ended up having to go to some care facilities, but she's doing so much better now. And it's just now working through her grief. I don't think my sister has started working through her grief a little bit, but it's so painful for her. She feels she's lost her best friend, and but she's not turned to anything, like drinking too much or doing anything like that. So, I was the lucky one that got that. But I actually do think I'm the lucky one that got sober and got so much wisdom from hearing other people's stories and hearing one of our fellows about, a couple weeks before my mom died, she had lost her daughter, and it
She was
really
on
hit me
she
very
did this
hard.
podcast.
She did?
Yeah, and she told that story.
I have to go back and listen to that because 'cause we're soul sisters in a way because we both lost in tragic ways very important people in our lives, and, you know, I wish my mom were here to see what a beautiful son we've raised, she and I, and my husband. I always said she was my womb. Um, but I never thought about drinking because I mean, I thought about it. I thought about escaping, but I never thought about drinking because no matter how bad I was hurting, no matter how horrible what I had to watch my son go through was, um, I knew I had to be here. I knew I had to be here for him, for me, for my husband, for my friends, for my job, for my family, and I felt useful. I didn't have that desperation of not wanting to be here anymore. And I, knock on wood, and I don't want anybody to test me on this, but I don't think I could go through anything that would put me back in that place of desperation. And I'm really grateful that I got it into the program the way I did because once I did rehab, I was like, "I'm not doing this again." That was hard, but I learned a lot about myself, and I realized that I could get through hard things and that I was strong. I already knew I could because I was the fix-it person for everybody, but now it was like, "Fix me." And I'm happy to say that my weight has always been an issue, and, the heaviest I've ever gotten was the last day of court where we had to read our victim impact statements. And I looked at a picture of me and I was going, "What has this done to me, to my body, to my physical self?" And so for the last 2 years, I've been on a shedding skin, shedding the experience, shedding, you know, the resentments, and I've lost 125 pounds. So,
Wow.
yeah, so I'm kind of now where I've always wanted to be in my life, and I feel healthy and I feel capable, and it's kinda like I tell people it's kinda like Forrest Gump where with the drinking too, it's like where he just runs back and forth and then eventually stops and just says, "Well, I'm done." And it's like that psychic change happened to me when I was drinking, and then it happened to me again with the weight loss. So it's the same using the same tools, I was able to attack another thing that was taking life away from me. So, um
I have to say I was, around I mean, not around you, I've never known you that well, but I was, there when that happened, and I was, hurt, and it has been such a transformation. I mean, to go through something like that, but to see you, and I think this is one of the magical things about this program is I remember there's a woman who from our group who I my one of my very first meetings, second meeting I ever went to, this woman shared. that literally the night before her husband had died in her arms, and she knows who she is. And I was like, what is this program where people are showing up? Like, this is the last place I would be if something like that happened. But all of these women were there for her and carried her along until and then, and that was 17 years ago. And every time it's just funny because when I share about like my birthday or whatever on Facebook, she always comments like, I know that because I said to her many years later, I was like, I was at a meeting when this horrible tragedy happened to you and you were there the next day. And I was like, this is just what we do. Like we
Mhm.
let people help us. And I feel like I watched you walk through this, and there was a long time before you shared about it at all, and it was like a big secret, and it was like somebody knew that we're like, "Oh, this happened, and this is a horrible tragedy that happened," and then eventually you were like, "You know what? I'm just gonna talk about it because I'm gonna share about it," and now it's just like a part of your I'm not saying like, "Oh, and now you're over it and you're fine," but I'm
No,
saying
it's just my
now
story.
it feels like a part of your story that you're willing to share to help
Yeah.
somebody else, which is such a beautiful message that to help somebody else go, you can get through this
You can't get through
sober.
this, and you can get through it sober, and I'm no different than any other alcoholic or addict, have the same, same propensity to wanna escape, and whatever the ism is, but then what? But then what? And so I have spent a lot of time working on the what, and, what would that look like? And ultimately, as bad as things were, and man, were they bad, um, I wouldn't give up this beautiful life of sobriety and recovery and the women that are in it and that continue to hold me up during hard times because it doesn't just end, and grief is traumatic grief is a whole nother beast to try to live through and deal with. And, so people are still there for me. I'm gonna need them there for me when and if she gets out, and there's a lot of things, but I stay in the day. I play through the drink. I go to my meetings. I sponsor a beautiful woman that has kept me sane, and I am sponsored by a beautiful woman that has kept me sane. Um, and yeah, I feel like people, if they don't look at the if they don't look at the kind of showbiz part of this, of being a tragic story, and it should be on, we've been approached to be able to make this into like a, documentary kind of thing. If you take that away, it's just the loss of a mom, and it's the trials of raising adopted children, it's mental illness, I had to do as much work when my son's grandfather died. He was distraught, still is, and that's life. We all go through things in life, but I know for me that going through life present and able to remember what I had talked about and said, and not to make it about me, but to listen and be a good listener and know that I'm teachable and I stay willing and I stay open and I'm honest to my best abilities, because you never know what might touch somebody's heart and go, you know, I'm in the middle of losing my mom or losing my dad or a loved one, and, a drink looks really good right now. But, when you ask yourself what's going to happen after, that what place that I talk about is just, okay, so you had 3 hours of a break, you're not going to feel good, and hopefully it was only 3 hours of a break. If not, you're off into the races. Like I know that I can't do this again. Like this is my rehab story. I mean, this is my rehab, my sobriety story, and I just pray, if I stay diligent, that I won't have another mm, time where I have to prove myself to stay sober again. I don't want to relapse.
Well, What a great story. Thank you so much for sharing it. I know
My
this is
pleasure.
going to help people. It has to help people. And if it doesn't, well, I
It
don't
was
know.
an
How to-
interesting story.
It was a really interesting story. And I'm so glad you shared it. Thank you, everybody. Tanya J. And
Thank
we will see
you.
everybody next week. Thank you for being here. Goodbye.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Life is good. Life